Good evening all, and welcome. The woods are especially creepy for a variety of reasons, but even more so when they are inhabited by the souls of the dearly departed, just waiting to see you, to spook the ever-loving hell out of you. So for now it's time to get comfortable. Follow me on Twitter, and let the darkness take control. So, as skeptical as I am about anything paranormal, with my logic being that just because science can't explain it yet, doesn't mean it's not creepy as hell, but some memories from my childhood are really starting to bother me. It was around 20 years ago. I grew up next to a very creepy 400-acre forested area in the middle of Tennessee, USA. Apparently, it used to belong to a family of freed slaves, way back when, which is now still owned and undeveloped, except for some really old, dilapidated and decomposing structures sporadically scattered across it, from when it was occupied by the original family. My brothers and I used to go hiking in the woods and found these places, but we stopped, because, well, that part comes later. For some clarity, I mean an old farmhouse, smokehouse, and on the border of the property line in the wooded area behind my old house was a rickety old house. Think Little House on the Prairie or old Amish style, and you get the picture, if you go ahead and age it an extra 150 years. So my old house, which was on kind of an elevation, with the backyard sloping to the wooded property line, bordered said creepy 300-acre wood. The neighborhood I was in was basically bordering the forest along this property line, with the house facing the street, with the backyards bordering the forest line that was demarked by a solid line of underbrush and very mature trees. So the memories and why I'm here. The first memory I have still creeps me out. So mind you, there are no roads, no inhabited houses, nothing built or done to this area because of land division dispute and some will/deed problems with the family who owns the land, and apparently it's been this way for over 150 years. Just forest. My sister and I were out playing in our backyard near the property line, where the creepy-ass, falling down little prairie-looking house was, when she spotted an old woman in the house. The front of the house was broken down, and you could clearly see into it. It had 2 stories, kind of like a cutaway from a dollhouse where you could take off the front and see all the rooms. Allegedly, this 70 to 80-year-old woman was just sitting in a green lawn chair, watching us from the 2nd-story loft. We were young, maybe 8. We didn't really notice some of the more peculiar aspects of this scene. We'd been playing for a few hours and would have seen someone walk by carrying a green lawn chair because we had a clear view of the house and you couldn't really get to it unless you either came from our yard or you hiked through a lot of wood. An elderly woman dragging a lawn chair up a rotted-out ladder to the 2nd story of a rotted-out loft and just chilling there watching me and my sister. So of course my sister goes and says hi, finds out she speaks, and said she used to live in that house a long time ago. She looked fairly normal for an old person, but the face was indistinct to me, like I couldn't really get a solid look at it for some reason. I got uncomfortable and said bye to the creepy old lady and left, where I basically grabbed my sister and we returned to the house. Now this bothers me, because no one has lived or been living in this area for nearly 150 years. No one could have, or should have been living there. There were no records of it or anything. Also, I knew for a fact that there is no road nor trail or anything that goes to the old house, even now thanks to Google Earth. So how did this old woman just appear and disappear? Because as we were walking back to the house, I glanced back at the property line about 80 yards back to the old house and the green chair, which was still there, but the old lady was gone. She didn't pass by us, Didn't hear her climb down. Nothing. Clear line of sight, early afternoon, not overcast, very well lit. She was simply gone. I did some research from when I had to steal stuff next door for school and couldn't find a similar person on my street or the next or even in the neighborhood. So to this day I still have no clue what happened there. A second memory. This happened a few times in middle school, but sometimes when I was walking home from the bus stop at the end of the street. The tree line and underbrush along the backyards of the house that bordered the creepy forest started to have glowing red dots in sporadic clusters and resembled to me eyes like tiny orbs of red dull light that appeared along the underbrush and followed me home. I thought it was maybe berries, but no. I hiked through that area with my brothers. No berries or red anything. Ever. Not holly or seasonal fruiting bushes or animals, 'cause we had some foxes, deer, and squirrels. That's about it. I couldn't explain it, then nor now. I just remember running home whenever I saw the lights in the underbrush, along the tree line, and would hide in my house as fast as I could. The one time I was brave enough to go up to the bushes, the lights disappeared before I even got close. No sound, no wind, nothing but a cold chill. Which at the time was weird, as it was late spring or early autumn in Tennessee when it happened to me. And it stays pretty damn warm usually. I couldn't ever find any evidence as to what it was. No red berries or critters, or some wackadoo raving around red Christmas lights. Yet, this memory still gets to me. My third memory. Why do I feel like I'm being watched? So my old house was old. Well, 30 years or so. Never really got the cold spots or the other classic signs that someone's making up stuff about having a paranormal encounter. But every now and then when I was alone, maybe the basement usually, or occasionally outside in the woods, I got the sensation someone or something else was there. And every time before I felt the sensation, I started to get afraid a little first, then full on mad dash away in full adrenaline mode whenever I realized what I was feeling. This happened more than I liked. I hated it and thought I was losing my mind. Mind you, I didn't do any drugs, prescribed or otherwise, and even didn't start drinking till college. I couldn't explain it, and it didn't fit panic attack symptoms or anything similar. I've been checked out and looked at, examined my medical records, but couldn't find anything from a biological perspective. There are a few more jarring experiences as well that happened to me, and I'm going to share these with you now. There was another occasion where I was tromping around the woods and felt like I was being forcibly turned around. My brother and I spent a good deal of our first 5 to 7 years at that house going in the forest, hiking around with no problems, usually, or how we all just stopped when we got close to high school age. And I chalked it up to us having other things to do, girls, sports, friends. Then I remembered arguably our last trip, and my second to last trip into that forest. My last trip made me never go into those woods again. Thinking back, maybe there's a reason why no one wants to develop the woods, or why the owners won't sell to anyone. I even checked. Even if the forest is prime real estate, South Nashville worth millions of dollars. Probably because we were kids or something. If we felt uncomfortable, we just didn't talk about it and cut trips short, so we ignored things. Except this trip that turned out to be our last group outing into the damn forest, because we were old enough to start knowing when things simply aren't right. Thinking back on those details through meditation and sorting through details with my brother, who didn't want to recall anything, seems like we made a conscientious decision to never speak of it again. Except, I wanted answers. And here's the story. So, usual gorgeous late spring Tennessee weather that begs you to get outside and go for a hike into nature. My brother and I gear up for a Saturday excursion into the woods to explore past the old ruined smokehouse to the left side of the woods. We trek through the back of our property line into the woods proper, trekking a straight line using our compasses to go to the circular clearing of protruding limestone. As we got closer, it got quiet, almost silent except for us trailblazing. We get to the clearing, and my two brothers in front of me stop and look at the center of the stone clearing, where a raised circle outcropping of rock is about 150 feet. I can't really see much at the time because I was still 4 foot nothing and behind those behemoths I call family. We didn't even notice some important details at first, like how quiet it was, there being no flies or anything around, or the wax dripping around the center stone circle, making an odd star-shaped pattern, and that it feels like we're being watched, where the back of your neck hair has gone up and you expect to turn around and see someone. My oldest brother goes up to the circle and just says, "Oh crap." I don't have a word, and my second brother starts to notice some of the weirdness about the outer part of the circle and goes to look. I, being the smallest, am curious, as all get out and go wander over to the middle where my oldest brother has gone a bit pale and is staring at something. I look past my older brother's shoulder and see on the top of the stone dies a lump of stuff. It is a disemboweled animal arranged strangely, but it wasn't eaten at all and appeared to be a fox. I remember thinking it was strange because I couldn't smell it, and there were no flies or anything or signs it had been bitten open, just splayed there with its organs somehow around it, like a dissection. At this time, everyone started to notice everything else I mentioned. When we confirmed it was more than just one of us feeling like that, we started to hear what sounded like the wind through the trees, but nothing was moving. Not the grass, the plants, and the treetops, which we all knew to look at to figure out the wind direction. Then my eldest brother said, "We're going back right now," in a serious tone that I'd never heard him use before. So we all collectively buggered out and went back to the house as fast as we could. I overheard my older brother talking about sacrifice and that we're not going back, and to tell Mom, Dad, and the police. I was 12, so I didn't think much of it and was more concerned with hanging out with my friends later in the day. I couldn't just focus on the memories, or I didn't want to think about it. The last time in those woods for me was this memory. Fast forward 2 to 3 months, and I'm doing a small hike through the woods alone, maybe 400 meters back from the tree line that borders the neighborhood. I wanted to move parallel to the road so I could get back easily by cutting out a right angle and walking back on the street to my house. 10 minutes into this, I start to turn right to go towards the street to get back in time to leave for the beach vacation with my mum and sister. That's when I felt it. The most uncomfortable and awful sensation I've ever felt in those woods. It was like I was being watched coldly, and it was getting closer. I never scared or spooked easily as a kid, and especially in woods. My background is important, as I was basically in various national parks every other weekend camping with my scout troop. I've been through solo orienteering courses day and night in all seasons to earn merit badges, and I don't freak out then, and when I was younger. But this time, I was spooked hard. I turned around and looked everywhere around me. It was very quiet, too quiet for Tennessee woods. If you've ever been to the southeastern US in summer, go anywhere near nature. You'll understand what I mean when I say it's never quiet. I yelled out tentatively, thinking it could be another person. God, I was hoping it was a person. Then it just got silent. And no, not any normal silence, like the kind where you can hear your own breathing. I freak out and bolt out those woods as fast as I can, and ended up getting the worst case of poison ivy in my life, and had to be sedated and put on steroids, I never went back to those woods after that. Last year, from January to July, I dated a guy called Lucas. He loved the paranormal more than I did. He's also a firm believer, while I tend to be more skeptical. I firmly believe in angels and demons, but I'm kind of iffy on the topic of ghosts due to my more religious upbringing, whereas he comes from a small town steeped in superstition, where I came from a big city, where we had so much going on to even consider the afterlife. We met during my freshman year of college. He attended the community college and I attended the major university. My roommate and I got bored one night and had downloaded Tinder more as a joke than anything else. Nevertheless, I matched with Lucas and he was eager to meet and could hold a conversation, and I decided, why not? We met at the local barbecue place right off my campus and spoke for hours. Towards the end, he asked me, "Do you believe in ghosts?" I felt like this could be a trap. What if I say yes and he thinks I'm crazy? I told him I wasn't really sure but was open to the notion. He told me he could turn me into a believer. I was like, bet. And we decided one day he'd take me to the local ghost tour. He was a native of my small college town. He knew every superstition, every back road, and he knew stories only locals knew. The stuff you can't really find online. We kind of fell off when I went home that summer. We had something happen to us a week prior to the semester ending. We almost died and kind of wanted to be alone to process it. That's a story for another time. Fast forward to November of my sophomore year. He randomly sent me a friend request on Facebook, and I accepted and we started chatting via the messenger. We get back on the topic of the paranormal and I asked, "Hey, do you remember the night we almost died?" He replied that he does. I told him I wanted to go back to the spot, a cemetery, where we had something freaky happen. We were actually on a ghost hunt then, and I was super casual about it all, as I was 100% convinced nothing would happen. "Hell no, I didn't want to go back there, I almost died," he said. "But I can show you the bridge. It's haunted," he goes. He picks me up from my old dorm, and we set out for the bridge. It took us about 20 minutes to get there. It was up in the mountains, and there weren't any streetlights of any kind. The bridge stretched over this creek, and there are woods all around the bridge. Middle of nowhere, literally. We exit his truck with flashlights and go to stand on the bridge. I ask him to tell me the story as to why it's haunted. He goes on to tell me that back in the 1960s, there lived a doctor called Dr. Gary. He was a rural mountain doctor and would take house calls. He was heading home one night. It was later than usual. He was exhausted and overworked and came down the mountain flying towards the bridge. As he was about to cross it, he had a heart attack and lost control of his small car. His car swerved across the bridge, hitting the side 3 times before flipping over into the creek below. Obviously, he passed away. It is said that every night Dr. Gary relives his death and drives across the bridge every night before splashing into the creek. You'll hear a loud bam as his car hits the side, and then twice more before a splash. Before that, you'll see his 1960s car coming around the bend. Lucas has a large group of guy friends, and several of them aren't believers. He took them to the bridge to wait for Dr. Gary, and they're all standing under the bridge when they heard the bam, bam, bam. It scared them so much, they refused to go back. I was living for this, and was so pumped to witness this. We got there at 11, and according to Lucas's dad, that's when Dr. Gary comes. Lucas was steadfast it would happen. I yelled, "Hey, Dr. Gary, I don't believe you exist. Show yourself." We waited for over an hour and nothing happened. Lucas was dumbfounded. We left and decided to try again the next night. For 3 nights, nothing happened. On the 4th night, we decided to go earlier. I had a test the next day and didn't want to be out late. We arrived at 9 p.m. Lucas asked me if I wanted to see the creek below the bridge. There are these stone steps you can go down and explore underneath. I was apprehensive and feared homeless people slumbering below or creeps waiting for easy targets to wander into their den. But still we headed down the steps when I heard people talking. They sounded young, maybe my age. I was 20 at the time, and figured we shouldn't go down there, but Lucas looked at me like I was crazy. He couldn't hear the people talking. It was so loud. There were at least 4 of them, and he shined his light below and shook his head. "Megan, there's no one down there," he said. He left me and went down the stairs, and I didn't want to be alone, so followed him. He was right. There was no one down there, but I knew I heard people clear as day. They were laughing. I could even tell some were male and others female. I was beyond confused. He was explaining to me how he and his friends liked to drink beer underneath the bridge when we heard a car coming. Because we were in an isolated place, we didn't hear cars pass by much. You'd only have about 1 or 2 an hour. I was like, oh, a car's driving above us. When all of a sudden we heard the bam, 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 followed by a splash. It was so intense the whole bridge was vibrating, and I'm like, crap. We sprint up the stairs and get in his truck. I honestly have no clue what would cause that. We didn't bail out and stuck around and ghost hunted. I had an EVP recorder and ghost detector device and got them out to see if I could speak with Dr. Gary. What happened with that I'll share for another time. I'd love to hear what you all have to say. I am now firmly a believer in him. After the bridge thing, the activity ramped up big time. All the nights before that were calm. Not this one. Me and my friend Jacob go out biking in a forest near my house because it's pretty big and has some nice trails. We'd been biking around an hour when we realized we were kind of lost. So we stopped to try and figure out where we were at. He was trying the map app on his phone when I noticed a house not too far off the trail. My friend's phone wasn't having any luck with connecting, so we decided to walk over to the house to check if someone could point us back in the right area. We knocked on the door, and like a horror movie, the door creaked open. We walked in to ask if anyone was there, and realized the place was empty. It was mostly furbished, but it looked pretty old, and the fridge was rancid. My friend finds a staircase leading up a floor, and we decide to go up and check that part of the place out. The second I put my foot on the staircase, I felt nauseous. I almost fell over because of how bad it felt. My friend helps me walk out the place, but I collapsed outside on the ground and began vomiting. My friend is trying to help me from falling into my vomit, and once I was done, I sat back and tried to get air. That's when my friend turned around and mumbled, "Holy crap, dude." I turn around. The entire house is gone. Like, not even there was dirt and stuff that proved the house was there. I mean, it looked like the house had never been there in the first place. There was even a tree growing in a spot where the corner of the place was. I didn't really know what to say, so I just sat there, staring at the ground. That's when I realized I had taken a picture of the place on my phone. So I pulled it out, trying to see if I had actually taken a picture or not. It was just a picture of the ground covered in dead leaves and grass. We decided that moving was better than staying there, and after half an hour we found our way back to the trail we knew. I've got no idea what the hell that was. Has anyone else seen this? I can't be the only one, right? I thought I'd share a few stories I heard from my ex-boyfriend's mother that I thought were pretty fascinating. We're all from the same reservation, so I can explain the setting pretty well. Basically, there's this one bush road that takes you from the reservation to deep into the woods until you get to another town. But that stretch of dirt road goes on for about 45 minutes. I think it was an old logging road, but we just call it the limit. and we use the area of forest for camping, fishing, ski-doo riding, and four-wheel riding and stuff. But it's also just a chill road to drive down with your friends. If you're from a small town, you know how it is. She had 2 paranormal experiences on this particular road, which isn't entirely out of the ordinary. My dad even has an experience on this road too. In fact, the road is known for all manner of strange things. But it's fine, no one's scared of it, and I drive down it to go watch pretty sunsets. It's chill. The first story is about a weird time loop. She and her cousin were driving down this road to go get some water, since there was also a natural spring around there. On their way back, their car stalls out and just won't start up again. This happened back in the 80s, so there were no cell phones you could use to call for help, so they started walking. They weren't too far, and they had plenty of daylight left, so it was fine. But as they're walking, they see another car stopped in the distance. So they think, oh cool, we can get a ride from these guys. But as they approach it, they see that it's the same make and model of their car. They get closer and realize it is their car. They're confused as hell, but can completely verify it's their car by looking in the windows. The sweater she left in the back seat, the empty pop can her cousin was drinking out of. Everything inside was exactly as they left it. They didn't know what to do. They hadn't turned off the dirt road at all. They hadn't even walked far enough to make it onto another trail they could turn off of. They thought it was weird, but figured they should just keep walking, as it's all they could do. They kept going, and sure enough, up ahead down the road there's a car parked, the same as before. This time they're tripping the hell out. They run up, and it's their car again. Her cousin gets a stick from the woods and leaves it on the hood of the car, saying that if they keep walking and the same thing happens, they can at least see if the stick would be moved. They take off walking and it happens again. This time the stick is gone. She described a feeling of being afraid that the loop would just go on and on forever, but it didn't. The next time they walked down the road, they realized they were able to walk further and eventually made it back to the res. They got help and towed the car, but never got an explanation or figured out what really happened. She has no idea why the stick that they left on the hood of the car disappeared. They really have zero idea, and neither do I. The second story is about a UFO sighting she had with some friends on that same road. This happened years later after the first incident, maybe early 90s, and it was during the summertime. She and her friends were riding around in a car, having a few beers, not the driver of course, and listening to music. One of their friends commented that there must be a four-wheeler out in the woods, because it's weird since there's no trail there. They look to see what he's talking about, and all you see are these white lights emanating from deep in the woods. You can see that there's a source of light, but you can't see the object itself through the trees. The driver slows down and turns down the music. She described that there wasn't anything too alarming about what they were seeing at that point, but they were feeling that something wasn't right. And she said that everyone felt it, because all of them got quiet as they looked out the windows, which were wide open. When things got quiet, they were able to hear a low humming. She had a hard time describing the humming, just that it was a very low hum, but almost felt like a ringing in the ears. They all heard it. They were silent, looking at the lights, but then whatever it was shot up directly into the sky, and they said they saw a UFO. This was so long ago, I wish I could describe more about it. But she did say that the second it shot into the sky, it changed into all sorts of colors that seemed to rotate around the craft. It paused right above the tree line for a few seconds and then just took off right into the horizon, lights changing again as it moved. And that's it. It's weird too that everyone's experience on this road is so vastly different. There are some sightings of creatures from our Algonquin folklore. There's Bigfoot sightings, UFO sightings, the time loop, and then I have other friends who just heard really creepy singing that got closer and closer. We also just found out that our entire reservation is sitting atop a huge uranium deposit, apparently the largest in our province, but I'm not sure. Nuclear mining companies kept trying to build mines, but we keep refusing. I'm wondering if that has something to do with it, because of the amount of paranormal stuff happening around here is pretty wild. I am usually pretty skeptical about the unexplainable. I have, in fact, shared stories about this in the past, as I've had many unexplainable things happen during my life. Anyway, the woods by my house here, I love them. They've never bothered me. I was in Boy Scouts for 5 years and I've never been creeped out by the woods. I've been alone in the woods and it's never been an issue. But those woods are different. I've never been in the woods, but I've been just outside them. Once I was waiting for my girlfriend's mum to fall asleep, so she could sneak out for me. She told me to wait by the woods in my car. When I was there, I felt like I was being watched and felt very uneasy. I didn't feel safe at all. I didn't want to get out my car, to be honest, and I repeatedly made sure that my car was locked, and I shrunk down in my seat a bit. Afterwards, I spoke to my girlfriend about it. She mentioned the woods in the past, but I didn't think it was those particular woods. She told me about some of the experiences she had in there. I trust my girlfriend not to make this kind of stuff up. She isn't that kind of person. But I'm more of a believer if it happens to me, or if I witness something personally. She shared with me a few experiences. Like once, she was in her car with her ex by the woods. I'm pretty sure it was exactly the same spot we were at, in fact, and they both heard a bone-chilling scream. It was off in the distance, so it was faint. It sounded like a woman's scream. She heard it a few times. She's also seen white humanoid figures with long arms. She told me that her and some of her friends went into the woods and would leave each other alone for a bit, as a sort of game. When it was her turn, she felt like she was being watched in all directions, and she heard leaves rustling like something was moving. It was only for 5 minutes, and then her friends came back. When it was her turn, they found them in a fetal position with scratch marks on their arm. They weren't too deep. Once, they found the guy, they helped him, and booked it out the woods. Despite those stories and being too afraid to get out my car, I didn't really have a reason to anyway. I want to go investigate for myself, but I sure as hell won't go alone. But my girlfriend is done with those woods. There's no way she'd ever go back there. If I ever do go into those woods, I'll record what I find and share it. Her house. I haven't seen much that happens in person. Most of it has been over FaceTime. I've only seen a few things for myself. Others she'll tell me. We FaceTime late at night so she can sleep, as my presence relaxes her, just knowing I'm there. One time when she was dead asleep, I saw the blanket slide off her a bit. It wasn't her moving or anything, the blanket just got pulled off, slowly, maybe an inch or so. I found that creepy, to say the least. Her phone also has moved on its own while I've been on FaceTime. One time I heard tapping on her screen and thought it was her doing it to mess with me. I told her to knock it off because I was trying to sleep too. I look over at my phone and she was facing away from the phone and asleep. These are personal experiences I've had. Some of the things she's told me are creepy as hell, but I'm not quite sure I believe them. The real creepy stuff started happening a few weeks ago. She went to her dad's house about 3 hours north in the middle of nowhere, where she came back and started hearing footsteps running across her room late at night. She also hears laughing and crying. She feels like she's being watched, and she says she'll see a little girl hiding behind her closet door. She has a dresser next to her closet, and it leaves a little gap. That's where she says she sees the girl. The past few nights, she hasn't been able to sleep at all. I don't know if there really is a girl. Like I said, I haven't witnessed it myself, but whatever's going on, it really is keeping her up at night. I've spent the night at her house though. I've heard knocking on the windows. She has a fenced backyard, and the fence is one of those tall plastic ones that would be quite challenging to get over. The creepiest part is knocking always happens during the witching hour. 3 knocks. Sometimes rapid and sometimes slower. She says it's every night. The one time I checked the time it was 3:20, and all I know it's between 3 to 4. There's no way that it's a tree or anything like that. If it was, the fact that there's only 1 knocking around a specific time and only 3 times is very unlikely. Hopefully whatever's in her room doesn't follow her. We're looking to get an apartment together at the end of the year. In the meantime at least, is there anything you can do to ward off whatever negative energies or entities there are? I've read somewhere that 3 knocks is a sign of a demon, but I'm not sure if it is anything like that, or if there's anything that we can do at all. I also want to mention that her dad's house has a very dark energy. I'm good at sensing energies of places. One time we went there for a few days back in April. Whenever we were at the house, we were both irritable towards each other. We would leave and everything would be fine. She stayed there for a bit with her ex for a month, and it caused a lot of issues, and they ended up breaking up after staying there for a while. A little while after being there, we nearly break up. It's also important to say that she has had a traumatic past, and a lot of horrible things have happened in that house. Nothing like anyone's life being taken. I don't want to go into details, but there certainly might be some dark things based on those events still lingering in the walls. I'm wondering if anyone has ever had a similar experience, or knows what this is, because this thing was a huge part of my life growing up. For years I felt crazy and just accepted I was seeing things, until I came across a few others who claimed to have experienced similar things to me. I was a super anxious kid, the eldest of 3, with a really unhealthy and unhappy family dynamic. Up until I moved out. Every night, this heavy sense of dread would fall over the house, and I had major problems sleeping. When I eventually fell asleep, it would be restless and full of nightmares and sleep paralysis, which I still get frequently. A bit of background. When I hit about 12, I started waking up at 3 a.m. every night, thinking the room had suddenly lit up in a bright flash. I just passed it off as a car passing by and the headlights shining through the window. After a few months, I was still waking up at 3 a.m., but before the white flash. It was like a jagged lightning streak across the ceiling, blinding light, and would light up the whole room and make me see spots. It used to terrify me. There was always the heavy dread fear feeling building when it happened, so I used to just lie as still as I could and try to sleep, or at least pretend to. This went on for years. It never got to a point where it didn't scare me, but I kind of got used to it and even named it. One day when I was 16, my mother came to look in my room because she was getting pretty tired of me being all tired and angsty all the time. It's a really small box room, so it didn't take long, and there was absolutely nothing there. She went to take a shower and was alone in the hallway, with the dread feeling building again. I decided to go into my room because it was daylight. What could happen? So I walk in. I froze in there. Everything was completely silent, and the white light exploded from nothing in the middle of my room in front of my face, way brighter than the light in the room already, and more branched out than I'd ever seen it before, kind of like big fingers of lightning. It surrounded me for a second, then retracted back to the space from which it had come from. Needless to say, I lost my mind and had a Blair Witch Project level freak out with snot and everything. My mum and I went for a drive after that. Haven't seen the light that big since, but sometimes I catch a little flash here and there, but very rarely. About a year ago at a bar I work in, we were exchanging a few stories over drinks after hours. I told this story and one of my colleagues told me It was called house lightning. It's a common thing in Latvia where she's from. My boss also said he saw more or less the same flash in a forest a few decades ago, which incidentally is just across the road from where I grew up. Could it be related? Anyone seen anything similar or know what it could be? I completely accept the possibility it could have been a psychological thing, but I'm curious since other people have seen it too, and I haven't been able to find anything about it online. I used to live near a really well-known forest. It was claimed to be haunted, known as Black Forest. Now this forest is super creepy, and as you can imagine, dark, hence the name. I had one very scary and startling experience while driving through this forest, which made me never step foot in the area again. On a weekend, I was invited to go hang out with some friends, and I had nothing else to do, so I agreed. It was around 8 or 9, and it was dark out. Now, there are 2 ways I could get to my friend's house. 1, go through Black Forest, or 2, go around the forest and add 20 minutes to my journey. I usually avoid the forest because the roads are somewhat confusing, and I just couldn't see very well, there being no lights and all. However, today, I was impatient and decided to go through the forest. The ride to my friend's house was very uneventful, but the darkness of it all was very unpleasant to say the least. I stayed at my friend's house and started to head back around midnight, or near enough 1 a.m. Now, this is when I had my experience. While I was driving, I looked at my GPS a lot because of the roads, and I always wanted to check where I was going because some of these roads look like an actual road, but are merely driveways for a lot of these houses. I didn't want to trap myself in someone's driveway, so I checked my GPS a lot. So I was driving and came to a stop in front of a red light, right under a very dim street light. It was still pitch black, and I was the only one on the road. As I was getting there, I got a very weird feeling as if someone was watching me. I then looked to my passenger side door, only to see this glowing, zombie-looking like man, wearing what I could only describe as rags. He didn't look alive. His skin looked like it was falling off. He was very grey in colour and was just staring at me. I really thought my heart was going to explode because I was so scared. Even though the light was red, I floored it. But I wanted to see if the thing staring into my car was actually real. And right as I crossed through the median, I looked back. Nothing was there, and there was nowhere he could have gone that fast. I was spooked and drove all the way home, trying not to hit any red lights. This was right before a huge forest fire. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for following me on Twitter. Wait, that's not what I say. But you should, you really should, because I'm asking you so super nicely. Please. Maybe Instagram too if you want. Thank you everyone. A huge thank you to my amazing and lovely members and patrons for supporting me a little bit more. You can do the same by clicking the link at the top of the description, the join button, or the Patreon link. Either one are fine, and it really helps me out. And it helps me help you by making content. Even $1 a month would go really far. So, genuinely, thank you. I do hope you liked today's stories. I love woods, especially haunted woods. Ghosts are great. Don't you agree? Anyway, I am now going to sign off. But thank you. Stay awesome. And I'll see you on Twitter.